We're now on our top story in the typhoon that has caused widespread destruction in the Philippines. Early on Friday, Typhoon Haiyan slammed into the central island of Samar, packing winds of more than 300 kilometers an hour. It traveled west through the islands of Leyte and Cebu, and the storm then landed on Panay and is now moving away from the Philippines towards Vietnam.
There are reports of bodies in the streets in the central city of Tacloban. Officially, we've heard of 100 fatalities, but that number is expected to rise. So many areas still cut off from communications. Flooding and landslides have washed out roads and much of the communication with that area. So it might even be days before we know the full impact of this storm.
We have Red Cross chapters in all those places, and we have, of course, reinforced those chapters over the last few days. So this is especially related to Tacloban and Samar Island. We are now trying with assessment teams to reach, especially Leyte, which seems to be the most hard-hit part of the country, but there are still some other outside islands. We also try to reach with other assessment teams, so we have more than 6 assessment teams out, trying to gather information, but moving around is very difficult. We get reports of roads being blocked, floods are around, so trees have been fallen on the street, so it's very difficult now in the moment to move to those places.
The rescue operation is now fully underway in this area of the Philippines. It's impossible to imagine just how many people have been left stranded like this. The storm may have now passed through, but the damage left behind is clear. What's now been dubbed a super typhoon has had devastating consequences. This is Tacloban city. The little news from here is bleak. Reports of dead bodies lying in the streets. Disaster officials say nearly all the buildings here were destroyed. Images from the typhoon in full flow give some idea of what it must have been like to be in its path. Typhoon Haiyan, possibly the strongest storm to ever reach land.
The Philippines is no stranger to big storms. It has seen 24 this year, but nothing like this. The images have been spectacular. A composite photograph of the view from space. The sharply defined eye of the storm at its peak. The gigantic pinwheel hurtling across the Philippines towards Southeast Asia. A storm big enough to cover much of the United States. Are giant storms like this one the shape of things to come, spawned by global warming?
Climate models have shown that warming could make these systems stronger. Now, we don't know that that was the case with Haiyan, but this was the most powerful system to have ever made landfall on record.